"You're just a freeloader," my dad yelled, then pulled my bags to the front door. Mom only said, "Maybe it's time you quit depending on us." I didn't fight, I just walked out. 3 weeks later, my phone buzzed. "Why can't we get into the joint account?" I texted back, "Ask the freeloader." 10 minutes later, my aunt was ringing my phone nonstop. My own father looked me dead in the eye, tossed my suitcase at my feet, and called me a freeloader. In that brutal moment, my world didn't just crumble, it ignited a fire I never knew I had. The air in the living room was thick with unspoken words, Mom's silence a heavy blanket, Dad's arms crossed, a cold, hard line across his face. It felt less like a home, and more like an execution. "My name is Ethan, I'm 26, and just 3 weeks ago, I was living in the guest room of the house I grew up in." "Yeah," is the key word there. It wasn't some dramatic downfall, you know? I wasn't out partying every night or just freeloading without a care. I actually had a job, remote freelance web development. It wasn't always a steady paycheck, but it kept me afloat. Last year, when my apartment lease ended and the rent suddenly doubled, my parents suggested I move back home for a bit to save up. I really didn't want to. I knew living with them again, in my mid-20s, would be complicated. But I agreed, thinking, 6 months, tops. It's just temporary. That was the plan. At first, it was fine. My mom, bless her heart, seemed thrilled to have me back, or at least she put on a good show. She'd cook dinner, invite me to watch her cheesy medical dramas. My dad, Mark, he was more reserved, but civil. We had this unspoken truce, I stayed out of his way, he stayed out of mine. And it worked, until it didn't. The first time I felt things shift, truly shift, was during a Sunday lunch. Mom had made roast chicken, the kind she knew I loved. We were all at the table, me, her, and Dad, who was already 2 beers deep before I even sat down. Somewhere between passing the mashed potatoes and him refilling his glass, he looked at me with this weirdly casual tone and said, "So, when do you plan on getting a real job?" I just blinked. "I have a job," I said. He snorted. "Freelancing isn't a job. That's just being unemployed with extra steps." I laughed awkwardly, assuming he was joking. He absolutely wasn't. Mom tried to defuse it. "Mark, come on," she said. "It's different now. Everyone works from home." But he wouldn't let it go. If he's working so much, how come he's home all day, every day? No calls, no clients visiting, no boss, just him in his room playing on that computer. "It's coding, Dad," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "I build websites. I work with clients remotely." He just muttered, stabbing his chicken, "Building websites, like a hobby." That conversation stuck with me for days. I didn't say anything, didn't bring it up, but the tension, it just started growing. He'd make these little digs whenever we crossed paths in the hallway. Stuff like, "When I was your age, I already had 2 kids and a mortgage." Or, "Must be nice living here rent-free while the rest of us break our backs." I tried to laugh it off, but there was always this heavy lump in my throat afterwards. It's wild how quickly you can feel like a stranger in your own home. Mom didn't say much. She'd just give me these sad, tight-lipped smiles, changing the subject whenever things got awkward. I could tell she was slipping back into her old habits, peacekeeping, trying to keep Dad from blowing up, pretending everything was fine. She'd ask if I needed anything at the store, but she never actually defended me. Not really. Then came the comment that really stung. I had just wrapped up a huge client project, a full e-commerce redesign that took 3 weeks and paid me more than Dad probably thought I was worth in a month. I mentioned it casually over breakfast, feeling, honestly, kind of proud. "Well," Dad said, sipping his coffee, "maybe you can finally start paying your way around here, huh?" I just looked at him. "I've been buying groceries, helping Mom around the house, fixing the router every time it breaks." He scoffed. "That's not paying your way. That's being a decent house guest." That phrase, house guest, it slapped harder than I expected. It was subtle, but the message was crystal clear. I wasn't part of the family anymore. I was a burden, a freeloader, as he'd later make even more explicit. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't pack my bags and storm out. I just worked more, saved quietly, putting money into my own joint account, one my parents knew nothing about. I kept my head down, but that silent resentment, it just simmered. I knew Dad wasn't going to let this go. A week later, I overheard him on the phone in the garage. I really didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the door was open, and then I heard my name. "Still here," he was saying. "I swear, Laura, the boy has no shame. Sitting on that computer all day like he's some kind of tech guru. At this rate, he'll be 30 and still sleeping in the spare room." My stomach just dropped. I stepped back quietly and went upstairs. That was the moment it stopped being just annoying and started being deeply personal. I wasn't just overstaying my welcome, I was a punchline in his conversations. I could feel the walls closing in. Every day became a tightrope walk. If I worked late, he'd make passive-aggressive comments about me sleeping in. If I left dishes in the sink, even for 5 minutes, he'd grumble about me expecting servants. Mom just kept walking on eggshells, hoping to keep the peace. But that peace, it had already shattered. She just didn't want to admit it. Then came the breaking point. One Thursday afternoon, I was on a video call with a major client, a potential 6-month retainer. I had my headphones on, trying to stay laser-focused, when Dad just barged into my room without knocking. "Hey," he barked. "You didn't take the trash out." I muted the call, glancing at him. "I was going to, after the meeting. You've been in here all day. You can't walk 10 feet to do a basic chore?" He scoffed. "I'm working." "Oh, working?" he sneered. "Must be nice to play tech support from your bedroom and call it a career." I didn't respond. I just turned back to the screen, unmuted, and kept talking like he wasn't even there. And that was the last straw for him. That night, I came downstairs for a snack and saw both my parents waiting in the living room. Dad stood by the front door, arms crossed. My duffel bag was on the floor next to him. My backpack, too. "What's going on?" I asked, already knowing the answer deep down. "You're nothing but a freeloader." Dad snapped. "It's time you grew up, found your own place. This isn't a shelter." I turned to Mom, desperate for some sign of support, anything. She didn't meet my eyes. Just softly said, "Maybe it's time you stopped relying on us." There was no yelling, no screaming, just this cold, calculated rejection. I stared at them for a long time, then slowly, deliberately, picked up my bag. I didn't argue. I just left. I didn't cry that night, not at first. I checked into a cheap Airbnb, lay down, and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't sadness. It was pure shock. Like I'd been exiled from my own life. 3 weeks passed. I didn't reach out. I didn't respond to their texts. I just worked harder than ever, landed that retainer deal, picked up 2 more clients, and started putting things into motion that I'd kept on the back burner for too long. Then, last Friday, my phone lit up. "Why can't we access the joint account?" It was Mom's number. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen, before finally replying, "Ask the freeloader." 10 minutes later, my Aunt Rebecca was calling, blowing up my phone, but I didn't pick up. Not yet. Because they didn't know what I had done. Not yet. And that's when things really started to unravel. I didn't answer Aunt Rebecca's calls right away. I just watched my phone ring, over and over, her name lighting up the screen like a warning siren. Then Uncle Kevin called. And then, weirdly enough, my younger cousin Chloe. I hadn't heard from Chloe in nearly a year, not since she borrowed $300 and then ghosted me when I gently reminded her to pay it back. That was the moment I knew something much bigger was going on. But before we dive into that, I need to explain this joint account they were all so upset about. See? Yeah, I technically set one up a few years ago. it was supposed to be a safety net. When my grandfather passed, he left a small inheritance, split between his children, which included my dad, Mark, and Aunt Rebecca, and their descendants. It wasn't millions, but it was sizable, life-changing if you used it right. The thing was, Grandpa didn't really trust Dad with money, or Aunt Rebecca, and definitely not Uncle Kevin, who once bought a motorcycle on credit during a tax audit. So, instead of giving it to them directly, he gave me power of attorney over our family's portion. I was 21 at the time. Everyone agreed it was fine, just paperwork, Dad had said, waving it off. Mom even smiled proudly and told me, "He trusts you, Ethan." That's special. I took it seriously. I never touched that money unless it was mutually agreed upon. Back then, they'd occasionally use it for house repairs, unexpected bills, even helping Chloe with a semester of tuition. But over time, the requests got more frequent, sketchier. I started saying no. And they really didn't like that. Which brings me back to the week before everything exploded. Things had been quiet. Too quiet. No texts, no calls, not even a "we miss you" from Mom, which I honestly thought I'd get eventually. I told myself I didn't care, that I was used to being the scapegoat. But deep down, it hurt. Every time I saw a mother and son walking together, or even passed a family at a diner, something clenched in my chest. It was like they'd just flipped a switch, cutting me out without hesitation, like I was never a part of them in the first place. Until that joint account froze. That account, the one tied to Grandpa's inheritance, wasn't easy to access. Grandpa made sure of that. Withdrawals required two-factor authentication that came to my phone, and a password known only to me and the estate attorney. Still, I logged in that morning, just to check. Sure enough, someone had tried to transfer $8,000 out of it, twice. Both flagged as unauthorized. Then I saw it, a name that made my blood run cold, Chloe. She had somehow added herself as an authorized user, or at least tried to. Which was impossible unless someone had given her my personal information. I sat there, staring at the screen in disbelief. Not even angry at first, just stunned. I had trusted them. All of them. Now, I could see it clearly, this wasn't a family misunderstanding. This was coordinated. A few hours later, the texts started rolling in. "My mom, why is the account locked? We need to transfer the tuition payment. Aunt Rebecca, Ethan, your dad said you were acting out. Please don't be vindictive. Dad, don't ignore your family. Ethan, this money belongs to all of us. Chloe, I'm just trying to finish school, you selfish jerk." I felt this tight pressure in my chest, like I'd swallowed a live wire. And then came the kicker. A message from my mom. "I know your father can be harsh sometimes, but you're acting like a child. You're punishing everyone just because we asked you to grow up. That money isn't yours." That line. "That money isn't yours." That's when something inside me just snapped. Let me rewind just a little to paint the full picture of what I was truly dealing with. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. The one who never made waves. The one who stayed quiet during arguments, who offered to do the dishes even when it wasn't my turn. Chloe, she was the golden child. Always trying her best, even when she was clearly coasting through life. She wrecked her first car. She's young. Lost a scholarship because she partied through her sophomore year? College is hard. Skipped my birthday dinner 2 years in a row because she forgot? Don't hold grudges, Ethan. Every single family event revolved around making sure she felt supported. Meanwhile, if I so much as mentioned being stressed from work or having dating trouble, the mood would shift like I was bringing everyone down. My role? I was useful. Quiet, reliable, useful. So, I kept playing that part, even after I got the power of attorney. Even when they came asking for just a little bit to cover Chloe's summer in Spain or to fix the washing machine they'd been meaning to replace. It wasn't until I moved back home that I truly started to realize just how deep the favoritism ran. There was this one night, about 2 months before they kicked me out. I was sitting in the living room, watching TV after a long coding session, when Chloe just barged in, unannounced. Mom. Dad. You won't believe this, she shouted. Turns out, she'd overdraft her personal checking account again, and her landlord was threatening eviction. They didn't yell. They didn't scold. They didn't even ask what she spent her money on. They just turned to me. Ethan, Dad, Mark said, like it was the most natural thing in the world, can you help your cousin out with rent this month? I blinked. Why would I? She's family, Mom quickly added. She's just going through a rough patch. I looked at Chloe, who was already scrolling through her phone like this was all settled. I don't think that's a good idea, I said slowly. We've already helped her twice this year. She needs to figure out a plan. Dad's face just hardened. You're seriously going to let your own cousin get evicted? She's not getting evicted, I countered. She's just going to have to deal with the consequences of overspending. You're being cold, Mom whispered, disappointed. What happened to you? And just like that, I was the villain. So, yeah, when they tried to access the account without telling me, even after kicking me out, it wasn't a surprise. Not really. What was surprising was just how far they were willing to go. Later that evening, I got a call from the estate attorney. I just received a strange request from your father, he said. He's asking to have the account transferred into his name. Claims you're mentally unwell. I froze. He what? He submitted a letter. Not notarized, but it accuses you of erratic behavior. Says you've been acting unstable and vindictive. Wants to assume full control of the account to protect family interests. I sat there in stunned silence. He's trying to get me removed? I finally managed to ask. That's what it looks like, the attorney replied. I told him I wouldn't proceed without your consent. But Ethan, I've seen this before. You need to be careful. They're building a narrative. My chest felt like it was imploding. That wasn't just betrayal. That was character assassination. I didn't sleep that night. I just paced the tiny Airbnb living room, rereading every text, every message. Thinking back on all the times I'd let things slide. The birthday they forgot. The Christmas when Chloe got a MacBook and I got socks. The way Mom always said, "You're our rock, Ethan," but never actually stood up for me. I realized something that night. I had spent my whole life trying to be the good son, the quiet one, the one who didn't ask for much. And in the end, they still saw me as expendable. That's when I stopped pacing. That's when I opened my laptop, and that's when I started pulling receipts. But what I found, that changed everything. And it all started with a folder labeled House Renovation 2019. Let's just say they made a big mistake trusting me to set up their finances all those years ago. Because now I had leverage. Real leverage. But I'll get to that. Trust me, this rabbit hole goes deep. I didn't sleep after I found that folder. House Renovation 2019. It sounded so innocent. A file Dad had asked me to help organize years ago. I remembered setting up a budget spreadsheet back then, but I hadn't looked at it since. I only opened it now because I was trying to catalog every instance where the inheritance money had been used, above board or not. And that's when I found them, the receipts. Literal receipts, invoices, bank transfers, even screenshots of payment confirmations. One caught my eye, a $12,000 charge to a contractor I didn't recognize. I clicked deeper. Electrical work. But wait. I distinctly remembered Dad telling me they couldn't afford to rewire the upstairs back in 2019. Said it was too pricey. Said the inheritance was off limits. So, how did this invoice even exist? Then came another, for $1,800 to a private design consultant. The name wasn't familiar, so I Googled it. The address traced back to a woman named Sarah, a friend of Chloe's from college. A woman who, funnily enough, had posted a bathroom remodel on Instagram around that same time, using tiles identical to the ones now in my parents' and soot. My stomach just turned. They used the inheritance, secretly, lied about it, hid it, covered it up under vague project labels. I sat there, frozen, as all the pieces clicked into place. For years, I thought I was overreacting. I thought maybe I was just too sensitive, that dad was just old school, and mom was just caught in the middle. But this? This wasn't just favoritism. This was calculated misuse. They didn't just take the money. They stole it. From me. From Grandpa's memory. From the very trust they begged me to manage. And I was done. But I was also alone. That night, I hit rock bottom. I stared at my laptop screen until my eyes burned. The Airbnb was silent, save for the occasional hum of traffic outside. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't showered. I just sat there, feeling hollow. Every memory, Christmas mornings, family road trips, late-night kitchen talks with mom, all of it felt tainted. I started doubting myself. Was I overreacting again? Would anyone believe me if I went public with this? They'd paint me as ungrateful, as dramatic, as mentally unstable, just like Dad tried to tell the lawyer. It was raining hard outside. I stood by the window, watching water streak down the glass, and thought about Grandpa. The only person who ever truly listened to me without judgment. The man who trusted me. Not because I was the loudest or most confident, but because I was steady. Because I cared. And that's when something finally clicked. I hadn't just hit rock bottom. I'd finally hit bedrock. That unshakable part that doesn't crumble. The part you can actually build on. The next morning, I got up early, showered, and put on real clothes, not just sweats and a hoodie. I walked to a nearby cafe with my laptop and headphones, sat down with a strong cup of coffee, and opened a fresh document. Titled it, Rebuild. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming myself. I made a list, review all financial records tied to the joint account. Compile a timeline of every withdrawal and who authorized it. Track all unauthorized or sketchy payments. Get in touch with the estate lawyer about freezing the account permanently and updating access permissions. Find a new apartment, a real one, my own space. Build a new LLC for my freelance work, separate, clean, with clear boundaries. Create a backup emergency fund in a private account. Each item on that list felt like taking a brick out of the wall they'd built around me. The rebuilding didn't happen overnight. The first week was brutal. I was still getting calls from Aunt Rebecca. Chloe even sent me a voice note, fake crying, accusing me of ruining her future. I deleted it without listening twice. Mom finally left a voicemail, too. She didn't yell. She just sounded tired. Ethan, please, let's talk. This isn't you. You're better than this. That line stuck with me. You're better than this. No, Mom. I was finally being exactly who I needed to be. By the second week, things really started shifting. I got accepted for a quiet studio apartment on the other side of town. Small, but cozy. A tiny balcony that caught the afternoon sun. The kind of place where I could finally breathe. I paid the deposit in full. No help, no joint anything. I opened a business bank account and filed the paperwork for my LLC, Stonebeam Digital, a name that was actually a nod to Grandpa's old joke, even a beam of light needs a solid foundation. Then I landed a new client, a mid-size consulting firm that needed a long-term web developer. Steady work. Great pay. And best of all, complete respect. They didn't care that I worked from home or wore a hoodie while coding. They cared that I delivered. It was the first time in months I felt like someone truly saw me for my skills, not my shortcomings. Still, the silence from my parents cut deep. Not a single apology. Not even an attempt to make amends. Until the certified letter arrived. I was sitting on the floor of my new apartment, unpacking dishes, when it slid through the mail slot, a cream-colored envelope, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. My dad's. I opened it carefully. Inside was a printed letter, not handwritten, not personal, just cold, printed text. Ethan, it's unfortunate that you've decided to take such a hostile stance toward your own family. We've tried to be patient and reasonable, but your recent actions have caused significant stress and confusion. As the original heads of this household, your mother and I believe we are entitled to continued access to the family funds. We request that you immediately reinstate joint permissions and transfer decision-making authority to a neutral third party. Your Aunt Rebecca has volunteered. Failure to cooperate may result in legal escalation. We are deeply saddened that it has come to this. Dad. No signature. No love, Dad. Just cold, professional distance. They were serious. And I was furious, but I wasn't panicking. Because by then, I had everything I needed, the spreadsheets, the receipts, the emails, the clear intent. I sent a copy of the letter to the estate lawyer along with all the files I'd gathered. He called me 20 minutes later. This, he said, is exactly what we needed. I'll begin proceedings to lock down the account and open an inquiry into misuse. My hands trembled as I hung up. I wasn't scared. I was steady. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to keep the peace. I was building my own. But then, a week later, just when I thought things couldn't get any lower or any more absurd, I got an alert on my phone, joint account activity. Except the account was supposed to be frozen. And when I checked the app, I saw a name I hadn't expected, Uncle Kevin. Somehow, he had tried to reopen the account using fake credentials. And that's when I realized this wasn't just my parents. This was the whole family. I wasn't dealing with a few manipulative relatives. I was dealing with an operation, one that was about to be exposed. And I had the matches to light the whole thing up. I didn't react right away when I saw Uncle Kevin's name pop up on that account activity alert. I just stared at the notification, blinking slowly, like maybe I'd read it wrong. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was some weird glitch, or some unrelated person with the same name. But no. His full name was right there. His email, too. And the IP address that tried to access the joint account? From the exact city he lived in. He wasn't subtle. So now, Uncle Kevin had entered the game. And that confirmed something I'd been trying to deny. This wasn't just about my parents. This was bigger. They were coordinating. Talking behind my back. Plotting. And for what? A joint account they had no legal access to, money that was never even promised to them. I sat there for a few minutes, the light from my laptop screen flickering against the wall of my new studio apartment. The place still smelled faintly of paint and cardboard boxes. I hadn't even fully moved in yet. But suddenly, none of that mattered. Because now, it was game on. I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to set the record straight, and maybe, just maybe, burn a few bridges while I was at it. But this wasn't going to be a screaming match or some childish public meltdown. I didn't want vengeance with fireworks. I wanted precision. And most of all, I wanted receipts. I spent the next 3 days doing nothing but digging. I didn't work. I didn't stream. I barely slept. I just combed through every digital folder I had access to, backups, cloud storage, old email threads, documents I hadn't opened in years. I remembered how many times my parents had asked me to handle paperwork over the years, Grandpa's estate, renovation budgets, Chloe's loan agreements, which, by the way, were written like a child's wish list, with zero interest or due dates. I organized everything into 4 folders: unauthorized expenses, deception and misuse, inheritance access attempts, communication logs. Each folder had dozens of files. And as I compiled it all, I noticed something interesting, a pattern. Every single time the inheritance funds were used, my parents always came up with some moral justification. Ethan, this is for your home, too. It's just temporary. We'll replace it next month. Chloe is family. We help family. But it was never temporary. And they never asked. They assumed. Demanded. Guilt-tripped. And I had the proof. So now, it was time to prepare the next step, exposure. But first, I needed someone on my side. Not a lawyer, I already had the estate attorney handling the account itself. I needed someone inside the family, someone with knowledge, or at least influence. And weirdly enough, I thought of my cousin, Daniel. Daniel was Uncle Kevin's oldest kid. He was 29, a nurse, and had always kept his distance from family drama. He wasn't close with Chloe or my parents. And at Thanksgiving, he was usually the one sitting in the corner with headphones on, watching football on mute. We hadn't talked in years, but I remembered him being fair, quiet, but observant. So, I sent him a text, "Hey, I know it's random, but can I ask you something private about your dad?" It took 2 hours, but he replied, "Daniel, you mean the recent family money nonsense?" My eyebrows shot up. I typed fast, "Me. Yeah, you heard about the account?" "Daniel, my dad's been ranting about it all week. Said you're holding everyone hostage." I didn't really know what he meant. "Me, I'm not. I'm protecting Grandpa's will. They're trying to take funds illegally." "Daniel, I believe you." Just like that. No hesitation. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Me, do you know if your dad has copies of any documents or has said anything about trying to override the POA?" "Daniel, he mentioned something about forcing a vote, like having the family declare you unfit to manage the estate." Total nonsense. "Me, that's illegal unless I commit fraud or go completely off the rails, which I haven't." "Daniel, I know. Want me to record anything he says?" I froze. "Me, wait, you'd do that, Daniel?" "Daniel, if it protects Grandpa's money?" "Yeah." He didn't leave it to be wasted on backsplash tiles and Chloe's fake startups. I laughed out loud. A genuine, belly-shaking laugh, because finally, someone saw it. Someone who wasn't trying to manipulate me, or guilt me, or keep the peace. With Daniel quietly gathering intel from the inside, I turned my focus to preparation. I bought a domain, freeloaderfiles.com. I'm not kidding. It was tongue-in-cheek at first, a joke for myself, a wink at the name Dad had spat at me the night he threw my bags out. But then I realized this could actually work. I built a basic site, clean, minimal, password protected. I uploaded all the documents, scans, screenshots, timeline breakdowns, even a section called a frequently asked gaslights where I listed every excuse they'd ever used, and the financial record that directly contradicted it. It wasn't for the public. It wasn't even for legal authorities, though I made sure everything was accurate just in case. No, it was for them. A mirror they couldn't look away from. I also prepped a document I called the Legacy Letter. A 12-page PDF addressed directly to my mother. Not accusatory, not bitter, just honest. I told her everything, what I knew, how it felt, the nights I sat in my car wondering if I was the crazy one. I told her how much it hurt to hear her say, "Maybe it's time you stopped relying on us," when I had spent my entire life carrying them quietly, without complaint. The last line of that letter read, "If you still believe I'm the freeloader, then you're welcome to show this letter to the lawyer. But if you read this and feel even the smallest flicker of guilt, then maybe the person you've been relying on this whole time wasn't me. It was the version of yourself that didn't have to face the truth." I attached the link to freeloaderfiles.com at the bottom, password protected, of course. The password? Backbone. By the end of the month, everything was in place. Daniel had recorded 2 phone calls with Uncle Kevin, both of which included damning statements about getting Ethan out of the picture and using Chloe's name if we have to. The estate attorney had officially locked the account, pending a full audit. I had my new business up and running, 3 steady clients, and a calendar full of meetings. And most importantly, I was ready. Not just for the confrontation, but for the fundamental shift. Because this wasn't just about exposing what they did. It was about resetting the roles. I wasn't the scapegoat. I wasn't the helper. I wasn't the immature one holding the family together. I was done. And I had one last step, a family group text. I never used it, not even for holidays. But now I opened it up, scrolled to the top, and typed just 4 words, "Read this carefully." Then I dropped the link and hit send. I didn't expect a response right away, but 20 minutes later, my phone started ringing. It wasn't Dad. It wasn't Mom. It was Chloe, calling me for the first time since she'd accused me of ruining her future. And I was about to pick up. But not to explain. Not to apologize. To ask her one question: who told you could lie about me and get away with it? Chloe's name lit up my phone like a flare in the dark. I let it ring 4 times before I answered. "Hello," I said, my voice flat, calm. She didn't say hi. Didn't ask how I was. Her voice hit the air like a slap. "What is this?" she snapped. "That website, those files, are you trying to ruin us?" I didn't answer right away. I let her stew for a beat. I wanted her to feel that silence. Let it itch and crawl and press against her until it cracked. Then I said, "You tried to steal $8,000 from an account you don't have legal access to. That was a mistake." She sputtered. Dad said, "Oh, so you're admitting it now? You're blowing everything out of proportion. You made this expose like you're some kind of whistleblower. We're your family, Ethan." "You were my family," I corrected her. "Until you decided I was just an ATM with Wi-Fi. I needed help. You needed accountability." She paused. "Daniel betrayed us," she finally muttered. "Daniel protected Grandpa's wishes. Just like I did. Just like you didn't." Click. She hung up. I sat back in my chair, closed my eyes, and exhaled. It wasn't revenge yet. Not entirely. But the cracks, they were definitely starting to show. The next 48 hours were biblical. It started with Dad. He showed up at my apartment. Yes, showed up. No warning, no text, just banging on my door like a landlord with an eviction notice. I didn't open it. I watched through the peephole as he paced the hallway, red-faced and wild-eyed, waving a printed copy of the legacy letter like it was a warrant. I could hear him through the door. "Is this your idea of respect? You humiliate us. You post our personal business on the internet. It's password protected," I said through the door, my voice calm. "Only family has the link. So if you're embarrassed, maybe ask yourself why." He went quiet for a moment. "You ungrateful little," I opened the door a crack, just enough to meet his eyes. "Finish that sentence. I dare you." He froze. It wasn't fear. It was shock. He didn't recognize me. Not this version. The Ethan who didn't flinch. The Ethan who didn't try to patch things up for the sake of peace. "You don't get to shame me anymore," I said. "You don't get to call me a freeloader after misusing thousands in inheritance funds behind my back. You don't get to throw me out and then ask for handouts. I'm still your father," he muttered. "And I'm still Grandpa's legal heir," I replied. "You don't scare me anymore." He left without another word. The next fallout was even faster. Aunt Rebecca. She emailed the estate attorney, demanding I be immediately removed as power of attorney for being emotionally unstable and vindictive. He forwarded me the email. I replied, attaching all the call recordings Daniel had captured, including one where she clearly said, "Ethan's too soft. He'll cave eventually. Just push hard enough." I also included a brief timeline of every unauthorized transaction she had requested or directly benefited from, including the Christmas trip to Park City she'd claimed was fully covered by points. Spoiler, it wasn't. The estate attorney's reply to her was beautiful. "Dear Rebecca, after reviewing the evidence provided, there is no legal or ethical basis to remove Ethan from his duties. Your actions, however, may warrant further scrutiny. We recommend ceasing further contact unless through legal counsel. 2 hours later, she blocked me on everything. Then came the final act, Mom. No shouting. No emails. No dramatic knocks on my door. She called just once, and I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back later, she sounded defeated. Ethan, I read the letter. I didn't know about some of it. Or maybe I did, and I didn't want to admit it. I was scared. Your father has always been difficult. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would keep things from exploding. But I see now, silence is part of the explosion. I'm sorry. Not for what he did, but for what I didn't stop. I saved the voicemail, listened to it twice, then deleted it. Because forgiveness doesn't come from a single voicemail. It comes from change. A month later, the audit concluded. The inheritance account had been frozen completely, pending a redistribution process. Because here's the twist, Grandpa's will had a clause no one had ever noticed. Or maybe they had and just ignored it. If misuse of funds was discovered, the estate could reallocate everything to the one descendant deemed most responsible. And guess who the audit found to be the only legally compliant manager? That's right. Me. I didn't gloat. I didn't throw a party or send out smug messages. I just had the account restructured, transferred it into a secure trust. And this time, I didn't put anyone else's name on it. Not Mom's, not Chloe's, not even Daniel's. Though I did wire him a thank you bonus big enough to wipe his student loans clean. He refused at first. I insisted. It's not a reward, I told him. It's justice. With interest. The final family gathering came 6 months later. A forced Thanksgiving dinner, hosted by my grandma, the only relative not involved in the fiasco. She begged me to come. Said she just wanted one night where people could be in the same room without lawyers involved. I showed up late, wearing a clean button-down shirt, slacks, and a quiet smile. The room went still when I walked in. Chloe was there, her eyes flicking down at her plate. Aunt Rebecca avoided eye contact. Uncle Kevin muttered a hello like his mouth was full of sand. Dad didn't say a word. Mom, she just looked at me like she didn't know whether to hug me or cry. I sat down, ate my food, laughed at Grandma's stories, passed the gravy when asked. The whole time, I didn't acknowledge a single side conversation. I wasn't there to rebuild anything. I was there to mark the line. At one point, Chloe whispered, "Are you ever going to let this go?" I just smiled politely. "You think I did this to hurt you?" I said. "I didn't. I did this to stop you." And with that, I stood up, thanked Grandma for dinner, and walked out into the cool autumn air. The stars were sharp that night, cold and clear. I looked up at them for a long time. Not because I was searching for answers. Because I finally had peace. And if anyone ever asks me why I blew up my entire family over a joint account, I'll tell them this, because sometimes, peace has to be earned. And I stopped waiting for someone to give it to me. What would you have done if your own family pushed you to your absolute limit?